the great state of Utah. God bless the United States Constitution. God bless Senator Mike Lee. And God bless the United States of America. Your Senator Mike Lee, let me tell you something. Mike Lee is a rock star. On behalf of 26 million Texans, let me say to each and every one of you who knocked on doors, who sent emails, who called your friends, who relentlessly, passionately believed you could do the impossible and send Mike Lee to Washington, thank you. Out of all 100 senators, there is no other senator whom I respect more, whom I admire more, and who is a stronger or more passionate ally in the fight for liberty than Mike Lee. Mike Lee is brilliant. He's principled, but most especially, Mike Lee is fearless. If there's one thing that pervades the city of Washington, it is a spirit of fear and a spirit of timidity. Fortunately, Mike ain't drinking the water. Listen, in Texas, we have a certain appreciation for courage. After all, Chuck Norris is a native Texan. You know, when it gets cold, little kids like to wear Superman pajamas. Well, Superman wears Chuck Norris pajamas. And Chuck Norris wears Mike Lee pajamas. I remember back in 2012, when I was running for Senate in Texas. I remember one Saturday morning, about 6:30 in the morning, I was up on the phone doing a radio interview. And our eldest daughter, Caroline, she was 4 at the time. She jumped out of bed, as she often does on Saturday morning. She'd come running into the bedroom, threw open the bedroom door to come and run and play with Mom and Dad. Heidi, my wife, was still in bed at the time. She jumped out of bed, ran over, grabbed Caroline, brought her out to the living room. She said, "Not now, sweetie, not now. Daddy's doing a radio interview." Caroline crossed her arms. She stomped out. She said, "Politics, politics, politics. It's always politics." Let me tell you something. Y'all are here tonight for something a lot more important than politics. Y'all are here tonight, every man and woman is here tonight because you love your kids. You're here because you love your grandkids, because you love your freedom, because you love the United States of America, and because you want a better future. These are not ordinary times in politics. These are not ordinary times in our nation. There is a sense of urgency right now, unlike anything we have ever seen at any point in our life. The most common thing I hear as I travel the state of Texas, as I travel the country, is men and women come up to me, they put their hand on my shoulder, they look me in the eyes. They say, "Ted, I'm scared. I'm scared. I'm scared for the future. We are bankrupting this country. I'm scared that my kids and grandkids are not going to have the same freedom, the same opportunity we have been blessed to have." We are seeing extraordinary threats to our liberties today, extraordinary threats to our prosperity today. And yet I am here tonight with a word of encouragement and hope and optimism. I am incredibly optimistic. I am absolutely convinced that together we're going to turn this nation around. Yeah. I want to tell you the three things that we need to do together to turn this nation around, to pull back from the course we're on. The very first thing we need to do is stand for liberty. We have an administration that seems like it's going down the Bill of Rights, trying to violate each and every one of our constitutional rights.
Why are you clapping that? Why are you applauding that?
On the First Amendment, the IRS is asking citizen groups, tell us what books you're reading. Tell us the content of your prayers. Let me tell you something. The federal government has no business asking any American the content of their Although I do kind of wish the answer had been, forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do.
They do know what they do. They do know what they do.
And by the way, when it comes to the IRS, the simplest and best solution, we should abolish the IRS. You look at the Second Amendment. Vice President Joe Biden. You know the nice thing, Governor? You don't need a punchline. I promise you, go to a cocktail party. Just walk up to somebody and say, Vice President Joe Biden. Close your mouth. They will crack up laughing, I promise you. But Vice President Joe Biden said, if anyone attacks your house, just go outside with a double-barreled shotgun and fire both barrels in the air. Now that is very, very good advice. If it so happens you're being attacked by a flock of geese. You take the Fourth and Fifth Amendments, our right to privacy. How many of y'all have your cell phones? I want to ask you to please leave your cell phones on. I want to make sure President Obama hears every word we had to say tonight. In addition to the assault on our liberties, President Obama is the most lawless president this nation has ever seen. Never before have we seen a president who, if he disagrees with a law, he simply says he will not enforce it. He's done that with immigration laws, with marriage laws, with drug laws, with welfare laws. The Constitution gives the president a responsibility to take care that the laws be faithfully executed. This president openly defies that. Take Obamacare. Please, take Obamacare.
Yeah, do take it. Take it away.
There is no better example of lawlessness than this administration's non-enforcement of Obamacare. The president illegally granted an exemption to his friends in big business despite the fact that nothing in the law gives him the power to do so. The president illegally granted an exemption to members of Congress, despite the fact that nothing in the law gives him the power to do so. And when over 6 million Americans lost their health care insurance because of Obamacare, despite the president's repeated promises, if you like your insurance plan, you can keep your insurance plan. The president didn't do what 43 other presidents before him would have done. He didn't come to Congress and say, this federal law is a disaster, it's not working, let's fix it. How many of y'all remember Schoolhouse Rock? You remember how a bill becomes a law? I think the president missed that day. This president held a press conference in which he instructed private insurance companies, go violate the law. I am telling you, go and issue policies that the text of the law says are illegal. Never in over 200 years of our nation's history have we had a president of the United States instruct private citizens, instruct private companies to go and violate the law at presidential whim. And let me say this should not be a partisan issue. It doesn't matter if you're a Republican or a Democrat or an independent or a libertarian. If you value liberty, if you value the rule of law, if you have a president who can pick and choose which laws to follow and which laws to ignore, then you no longer have a president. So number one, we need to stand for liberty. Number two, we need to stand for growth and opportunity. My very top priority in office from day one has been working to restore jobs and economic growth. And the reason is simple. That is the top priority of the 26 million Texans I'm responsible for representing, and it's the top priority of Americans all over this country. For the last 5 years, we have been trapped in what I call the Great Stagnation. Utterly stagnant economic growth. And by the way, the people being hurt are not the wealthy, are not the powerful. Those who walk the corridors of power in the Obama administration are getting fat and happy. The top 1% in our economy, the millionaires and billionaires the president loves to demagogue, earn a higher share of our income today than any year since 1928. But not to worry, nothing bad happened after 1928.
Just a stock market crash.
The dirty little secret that the media will never tell you is the people who have been hurt the most in the Obama economy are the most vulnerable among us. They're young people, they're Hispanics, they're African Americans, they're single moms. You know, earlier today I was at a rally up in Nebraska. A single mom named Barb came up to me. She came up to me and she hugged my neck. She said, "Ted, I've got 6 kids now. I'm working 5 jobs right now. My husband left me, and he's not paying child support." She had a tear in her eye as she described trying to keep food on the table for her kids, trying to keep clothes on the backs of her kids. And with 5 jobs, you know, with Obamacare and the 30-hour threshold, millions across this country have lost their full-time jobs, have been forced to work part-time. So now she goes from one part-time job to another part-time job to another part-time job. She can't make ends meet. And And she has almost no time to see her kids, to raise her kids, to be the mom to her kids that she wants with all of her heart. That's who's being hurt by the Obama economy. That's who we are fighting for. The number one reason to support economic growth is foundational for opportunity. Growth is how people climb the economic ladder and achieve the American dream. I try to think of every challenge from the perspective of my dad. Many of y'all got to know my dad when he was out in Salt Lake a few months ago. 57 years ago, my father fled Cuba. He'd been in prison, he'd been tortured, he'd been beaten almost to death. And when he came to America, he was 18 years old, he was penniless, he couldn't speak a word of English. He had $100 sewn into his underwear. I actually don't advise carrying money on your underwear. And he got a job washing dishes, making 50 cents an hour. Paid his way through school, went on to start a small business to work towards the American dream. Now, my dad has been my hero my entire life. But do you know what I find most remarkable about his story? How commonplace it is. Every one of us in this room has a story just like that, whether it's us or our parents or our grandparents. What ties Americans together is we are the children of those who risked everything for freedom. I often try to think how the policies we're seeing today would have impacted my dad if he were still washing dishes today. If he were, the odds are very, very high he would have lost his job because of $1.7 trillion in new taxes, because of crushing regulations that are hammering small businesses. And it's people like him, the teenage immigrants, that are being laid off. And you know, if my dad had been lucky enough not to lose his job, the odds are overwhelming he would have had his hours forcibly reduced to 28, 29 hours a week, because the threshold for Obamacare is 30 hours. And you can't pay your way through school, you can't feed your kids on 28 hours a week. So what do we do to turn this country around? We need to champion growth and opportunity. I think every Republican should have the words growth and opportunity tattooed on their hand. Heck, I'm so inspired I may get an eagle tattooed on my chest.
The church won't let us.
And that leads to the third
Munson
thing.
said no way.
Empower the American people. If you look to Washington, you will have nothing but despondency and despair. Washington is broken. And the biggest divide we have in this country, it's not between Republicans and Democrats. It is between career politicians in Washington, in both parties, and the American people. All across this country, you hear people, they say, what happens when they go to Washington? They're not listening to me. They go there and they just try to stay in power, and the Leviathan grows and grows and grows and grows, and our freedom shrinks and shrinks and shrinks and shrinks. If we had to count, if we had to count on Washington to fix things, there would be no hope. But let me tell you, if you remember just one thing that I said tonight, let it be this, that I am profoundly hopeful and optimistic. The book of Ecclesiastes tells us there is nothing new under the sun. Where we are today reminds me a great deal of the late 1970s. The late 1970s, you'll remember, Jimmy Carter was in the White House. We had the same failed economic policies, out of control spending and taxes and regulation. Led to the same stagnation and misery and malaise. We had the same feckless and naive foreign policy, making the world a much, much more dangerous place. By the way, if there is one person who is thrilled at the job Barack Obama is doing, it's Jimmy Carter. And what's interesting, you don't have to tell people why. But what happened in the late 70s was incredible. We saw a grassroots movement begin to sweep this country. Millions of men and women standing up who became the Reagan Revolution. It didn't come from Washington. Washington despised Ronald Reagan. It came from the American people. And the reason that I am encouraged, the reason that I am optimistic, the reason that I am hopeful is because of each and every one of you. As I travel the country, everywhere I go, we're seeing that same passion, that same enthusiasm, that same, the American people are waking up. And it's millions of people who, just like in 1980, hadn't been involved in politics. They were going to work, they were going to church, they were raising their kids, and they looked up and said, what is happening to our nation? That's what turned this country around then, and that's what's going to do it again today. I am convinced, because the American people are rising up and speaking out, in November 2014, we're going to retake the U.S. Senate. And we're going to retire Harry Reid as majority leader. Good as 2014 is going to be, 2016 is going to be even better. It comes from the people. It comes from empowering the people. So all of you who had your cell phones, I want to ask you to take your cell phones out again. Well, thank you. And I'm going to ask you, God bless you. I'm going to ask you to express those words of encouragement and to join the grassroots army we're building. I'm going to ask each of you to text the word growth to the number 33733. Let me say that again. Text the word growth to the number 33733. The only way we will turn this country around, the most powerful way to turn this country around, is to empower the American people to speak out for freedom, to speak out for growth, to speak out for opportunity, to speak out for the American dream. You know, one of the things I love about the junior senator from Utah is Mike Lee in Washington doesn't listen to the lobbyists on K Street. He doesn't listen to the party bosses in Washington. What your Senator Mike Lee says over and over again is, I don't work for you, I work for the people of Utah. And the way we turn this country around is exactly the same. The American people rise up and say, the path we're on, it isn't working. There is a better way. We can get back to the free market principles. We can get back to the constitutional liberties that have formed the foundation of making this the freest and most prosperous nation on earth. In conclusion, and with apologies to President Obama, I'd like to ask you a few questions. Can we retake the U.S. Senate? Yes, we can. Can we retire Harry Reid? Can we abolish the IRS? Can we repeal Obamacare? And can we bring back mourning in America? That, my friends, is change we can believe in. Thank you, and God bless you.
Excuse me.
God bless you.
We're going to say good evening. We did a presidential straw poll that none of the candidates on the straw poll were at the event where the straw poll was taken. It was with the Western Republican Leadership Conference. And if we can put the results up on the screen. We'll see you in the morning at the state convention, the Utah Republican Party state convention, and good night.
Thank you, folks. Hey, Ron. Thank you. Hey, Ron. Thank you. We listen to your show every day. Well, thank you. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you very, very much.
Hey, Ted. Fantastic. Thank you very much. Thank you. God bless you all.